Welcome to this recording of the launch event that Jack and I hosted on the 26th of January 2021. I hope you enjoy it. It is now 49 years since the Club of Rome's Limits to Growth was published, and in the past 5 decades we've continued to move ever deeper and deeper into our climate emergency and degradation globally across pretty much every metric you care to look at. We have so many people, more and more each year, that are unhappy at work because they're unable to fully express who they are, and they're unable to contribute to reversing this global degradation that we're heading deeper and deeper into. And this despite the fact that we have had more than 5 decades, a century, of various attempts to create business as a force for good. Over the past few decades, we've had initiatives like the triple bottom line, corporate social responsibility, servant leadership. None of them have managed to do any more than slow us down. None of them have managed to turn us around from a degenerative into a regenerative economy. To the extent that John Elkington, the originator of the triple bottom line, issued a couple of years ago a recall back to the factory for a refit. Why is this? Well, the conclusion that we dive deeper into in the book is that all of these initiatives touch only one or perhaps two of these 6 strata, whereas what we really need, because all 6 strata are interlinked, the only viable solution is if we multisolve across all 6 strata. We need solutions that function at the inner human level, at the interpersonal level, how we organize and run our companies, how we incorporate them, and only if all 4 strata are worked on simultaneously in an aligned way and designed to create business ecosystems and global ecosystems, will we be able to make the kind of systemic changes we need to make. Now, this you may be looking at and saying to yourself, well, this looks easy. Why haven't we done it up until now? Well, it looks easy, it's easy to say, but when you're trying to actually do it across all 6 strata simultaneously, we run into one fundamental issue. And this is a core theme of Rebuild, our toolkit for builders of a better world. Namely, most of us are only using one lens at a time. And many of us use a lens that depends on the validity of linear logic, that depends on things being either true or false. What Picasso and Einstein recognized, and what is deep inside Picasso's artwork, and you can see in the artwork that Nikki has created for our book, an attempt to represent in a Picasso style the essence of what the future might be, rather than the actual concrete things that will build it. What Picasso and Einstein recognized is the imperative to use multiple lenses, even if those lenses contradict each other. This is what we need if we're going to be able to deal with multi-solutions across all 6 strata using multiple lenses. As Picasso said, my painting of a horse may not look like the image of a horse, but it will certainly communicate to you the essence of horseness. This is what we need today, is the ability to use multiple lenses so that we can truly get at the essence of everything that is, rather than simply staying limited to what we can see through one lens based on linear logic. And to illustrate what that means, all too often we think that the opposite of true is false, whereas actually the opposite of true might be an equally deep truth that is simply not that truth. Equally, the opposite of false may not necessarily be something that is true, but simply a different falsehood that is not that false. This lack of capacity to use multiple lenses is at the heart of many of our issues and permeates much of how our economics is structured to describe the economy. So over to you, Jack, to talk a bit about this.
All right. Well, thanks, Graham. What I would like to do in this section of our presentation is just to mention a couple observations, particularly with the economics of our book. And each of these are integral, but they're all interrelated. And I don't know if we do it justice by listing these separately, but let me do that. Number one, there's been much debate about capitalism, whether it is served its purpose and or whether it is consistent with sustainability. We believe that capitalism in its fullest sense has yet to be implemented. And what we mean by this is a capitalism that is based on all 6 capitals and not only a one. And that's the variant of capitalism that's out there now only recognizes financial capital and money as the only currency. My next observation, we also believe that the business firm is the most important and the most necessary institution in order to enable us to solve our myriad crises, but not the business firm that exists now. And we both worked and researched our book in South Africa, and it both struck us this notion of apartheid, which was devastating for South Africa. And we also think this notion of separateness is also weakening and devastating our own economic system. And we offer and suggest a business firm that recognizes all stakeholders and not only the one, and recognizes capitalism as a regenerative system with many different capitals. Now, my next observation, we need the discipline of economics, and we need the profession of economists, but not the discipline that's out there now, and not the profession that's out there now. We need a discipline of economics that is conversant in ambiguity, in non-equilibrium, in plurality. And we need members of the economics profession with the ability to listen, who can imagine, who can work with ambiguity and work with other social scientists and other scientists in order to provision all of us and enable all of our capitals, all 6, to adequately flourish. And my last observation is what we think is very, very intriguing and industry. This is we're developing a new general theory of economies, which is the subject of our next book. And it isn't a general theory of economics, but a general theory of economies. And it is based on the notion that we're all interreliant and interdependent, just like nature. Is it ambitious? Yes. Is it necessary? Yes. And I list, this is something that we could go over in where we break out the necessary ingredients. And producing this general theory, this is like baking a egg. We need ingredients, and this is what we do need. And we'll be working on the best way of mixing these ingredients. And thanks.
So, thank you, Jack. What is it that is holding us back from getting stratum 6 and stratum 5 to be the kind of regenerative business, social, and natural ecosystems we need? They're all interlinked, as we said, and one of the big barriers lies at stratum 1. We all have some kind of a self-identity. If we don't have a self-identity, we're typically pretty unstable and are likely to end up being separated from the rest of society for our benefit and society's benefit. Or if we don't have a strong self-identity, it is very easy to be manipulated. The challenge is the strength of our self-identity can hold us back from transforming when changes in our global systems require us to transform our self-identity in order to interact differently, work in differently designed companies, and recognize the need to change from our apartheid-like incorporation through to a viable regenerative incorporation. Most of us have a self-identity where we say something like, I am, and then insert our job description or our job title. I am an engineer, I am a doctor, I am a CEO. What we need today is to progress to the next stage of adult development, from a stage that derives its self-identity from belonging to a group, identifying with the group norms, and identifying with one's job, roles, titles, to a self-identity that is firmly anchored in one's own values and integrity, where my identity comes from saying, I am me in everything that means, and I have the skills and the capacity of a CEO, of a doctor, of an engineer. This is critical. To do that, we can't put the load onto any of us as individuals to develop and to transform our self-identity, to develop the capacity to use the 28 post-logical lenses, the dialectic thought forms or transformational thought forms that are covered in the book. We need organizations that can help us do this. And this leads to levels 3, stratum 2, and stratum 4. There are 3 dimensions in how organizations are structured. Organizations are structured along the human axis, along the roles tasks axis, and along the incorporation axis. Every organization is somewhere in this 3-dimensional space. Almost all organizations are down at 0 or at most 1, 1, 1. There are a few that are getting up to the 2s on one or more of the axes, almost none that are getting up to the 5s on all 3 axes. Well, on just one axis even. Whilst we and a few other companies are incorporated as level 5 fair shares commons, we're not yet fully autopoietic, even though we do have development as a purpose. We're probably around level 3 or level 4 here. So what do these axes mean? A level 0 company for the human dimension sees people as replaceable tools, or at best as cogs in the wheel where you develop and perfect the individual skills. What we need, though, is at least organizations that are psychologically safe. However, you can't get psychological safety in an organization unless the organization is also self-managing and at least a standard cooperative or worker-owned business. You cannot have robust psychological safety if you're a level 0 standard limited company, or even if you have employee participation in the structures. Let alone get to where we need to be, which is where development is seen as a core purpose of the company. Regenerating the human being is a core purpose of the company. We also need companies that have autopoiesis, where the company itself recognizes when it's time for the company to split up, to create alternative companies or daughter companies, and even for the company to end itself. All of that only works if the company is incorporated at level 4 or even better, level 5. As Jack mentioned a few moments ago, the similarity between companies at these lower levels here and apartheid leads these companies to have similar kinds of dysfunctionalities. If you think of apartheid, in essence, it's a context of separation, and that context of separation shows up that in apartheid South Africa, if you were lucky enough to be born with a white skin, as I was, you had all of the voting rights. The power to govern the country was limited to those who were lucky enough to have a white skin, and that led inexorably to them having the lion's share of the financial benefit, the wealth generated. If you think of a level 0 limited company, the investors have all of the power to vote in the annual general meeting. They are the only people who have the power to govern the company, and they have the lion's share of the wealth generated. The similarity, the common ground, is so high that we can confidently say that just as you could not build a viable society on an apartheid system, we cannot build a viable regenerative circular economy that works for all on anything less than a level 3 incorporation, and quite likely we actually need to have a level 5 incorporation. Even level 3 lacks the capacity to truly include and embrace all capitals, multiple currencies for each capital, full governance power spread across all capitals, all stakeholders. We need companies that can function as a commons. And you can see as a simple example of where that shows up, if you think of a circular economy. In this simple circle, these companies need to trust each other for at least 10 years, quite likely 50 years. They need to fully trust each other, and the companies need to take decisions that will maximize the capacity of the circle to be a fully powerful circle, to be fully regenerative. This means trust across a 50-year time frame. If each company is incorporated as a limited company where the investors have the sole power as one stakeholder group representing one capital to take decisions to sell the company, to exit it, to split it up, none of the other companies can trust each other over a 50-year period. Company 1 is never going to put in the heavy upfront investment that is needed by Company 2 and Company 3 for them to optimally play their role 5, 10, 20 years down the line in creating an optimum circle. So the simple point that we're making in the toolkit is that if we are to have a regenerative economy, which is obviously based on circles and trust across time, we need to structure the whole circle so that it is inherently a commons, which works if each individual company is inherently a commons, shares in the wealth generated by each other company in the commons, in the circle, and that has trust, not because of contracts, but because each company has voting rights in every single other company where the decisions impact the functionality of the whole circle or each other. So this is what we need. And what is it? If you think, this is what we need to get local and global ecosystems to work. We must have a radically new incorporation based on a commons. We must have radically new ways of running the company so that they are autopoietic. If it's not a living system that can decide for itself when to live or die, it's not viable for a business ecosystem based on a commons. And we're only going to get there if we transform ourselves internally and our interactions with each other. To do that, we must move to the point where we develop the capacity to go beyond using single lenses, where we only see what that single lens shows us and are simply unable to see everything else that is. We need to get to the point where we are using multiple lenses. Once we're using multiple lenses, then we are able to see everything that is, including hidden dimensions that we're currently not seeing. And once we do that, we can get to the point where we can get true collaboration, because each of us recognizes that the reality that each of us experiences is uniquely ours, derived from the lenses that we are able to use. Each of us is using different sets of lenses. Each of us is experiencing a different reality. We need all of us and all of our lenses to get a really good idea of what actually is, so that we can get a good idea of what we can and must do to rebuild our world. That requires us to realize at an even deeper level than any of us is capable of today, the common ground, the oneness that unites us all, and the necessity of each of our differences, each of our uniquenesses, to be an integral and valued part of everything we do throughout all of our activities in life, but especially in our business life. After all, that's what enables an organization, a company, to do what a company is for. A company is there to deliver results that are way beyond the capacity of any one human being to deliver. And the challenges we face today require us to work together as companions in companies, tackling global-sized problems, delivering global-sized solutions that are inherently multi-solutions across all 6 levels.